it's Phil Stacey, Executive Sports Editor at the Salem News. Welcome to the first Salem News High School Sports Podcast of the 2024-25 season. I am alongside Assistant Sports Editor Matt Williams and Gloucester Times Sports Editor Nick Giannino. Gentlemen, what's going on?
How we doing?
Good. So let's dive right into it. The season starts tomorrow night for our North Shore area teams. Of course, we've got 13 in our area, and Nick has Gloucester and Manchester Essex down in his area. Our football preview sections are out in today's newspaper where we previewed every team. Every schedule is in there, tons of stats. There's a lot of historical data that we put together, tons of photos from both last season and guys playing this year. All kinds of good stuff in there that get you ready for this upcoming season. Guys, we've done a lot of the research. We've each talked to 5 different coaches for the preview, but we put feelers out to other coaches we have out there. What are your general feelings about this season?
Matt, I'll let you lead us off there. We'll start with the North Shore teams, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of unknowns, I feel like. Just looking at some of these names and whatnot. I mean, just trying to come up with different people to put in our crystal ball packages and whatnot. I mean, not a ton of returning skill position stalwarts out there.
Yeah. That's what jumps out at me right off the bat is like we lost a lot of skill guys to graduation. And then there were a few that either chose not to come out or transferred elsewhere or whatever. But it seems like, Nick, from Cape Ann all the way up through for us, decimated might be too strong of a word, but it does seem like there's going to be an awful lot of new faces at many of the skill positions, which I think in a way is exciting because we're going to see different guys come out and, surprise us as to what they might be able to do.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, too, looking at the numbers across the board. Some schools, some programs are having a lot of guys coming out for the program. Obviously, you look at a team like St. John's Prep, they're well over 100. But even some of the local teams, I know Gloucester had over 70 kids, which is pretty good. And then you got programs, that are down in the 40s. I think even some of the smaller schools in the 20s. So it's not exactly that same trend that we've been seeing the past decade where it's kind of dipped all across the board. I think it's a mixed bag, and some programs are in better shape than others. But yeah, in terms of the skill guys, I think you're right. I think we're going to see a lot of new faces out there, guys making a name for themselves at training camp and whatnot. And then the different types of offenses, right? We saw that a lot of teams are going more to the air, going to the spread in recent years, but I don't think that's true across the board. I think, at least some of the coaches I've talked to are doing more of the wing tee style or something similar to that, a lot of running packages and things of that nature. So I don't know. What do you guys think about the quarterbacks in our area? Are there going to be anyone jumping out there?
Well, to your point, Nick, before I get to quarterbacks, I think you're right in that I'm also hearing about a lot of, whether it's, double wing type stuff or, a lot of run-based stuff. And I think that might be more due to personnel than anything. If you're a team with small linemen, not everybody is St. John's or even Peabody, where you can put 280-pound or Peabody's got a couple of guys who go over 300. Willie.
Yeah, it sounds like Marblehead does too.
Yeah.
I know Masco's got at least one, if not 2 also.
Right. So not everybody has that ability to have those big guys. And when you don't, and I learned this more than 30 years ago when I was first starting to cover Ipswich. And I wasn't really all that familiar with the wing tee. There weren't like college teams that ran that, when I was growing up, you could watch Oklahoma run the wishbone, but there weren't a whole lot of, wing tee teams that were on college, on television, college sports in the 80s. So
yeah, minus the Army Navy, right?
Yeah, that's more like a flex bone, isn't it?
Yeah,
like what they run. But a lot of it is just predicated on like angle blocks and getting low and creating a wedge for one of your backs to get through. And I think whether it's because of some of the schools are smaller in size, like in Ipswich, who doesn't have a ton of kids out for the team, and that's what works best for them. Or size wise, or maybe they just feel like, you know what, like we have a game manager at quarterback. We don't have a big arm guy, but we have a couple of really good running backs. So let's play to the strength of what we have here. I mean, even it was a huge turnover in Danvers from last year to this year. They had 2 4-year starters graduate in Travis Vasine, the quarterback, and Owen Gasanowski, the running back / slot receiver. You don't just replace those guys. So when you bring in new guys, you can't expect to just come out and run the same thing right away. So I think even they're going to try to just kind of basic, run the ball, see what we can do, play to our strengths. And, if you can expand from there as the season goes on, great. But I think for a lot of these schools, it's going to be sticking with the basics early on until they can get a better lay of the land, so to speak. A few games under their belt, what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing.
But for me, I don't look at the scheme so much as the personnel, right? I mean, you mentioned Danvers. Danvers had 38 offensive touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
37 of them are gone.
Correct.
Right? So
Correct.
that's a crazy percentage. Now, Danvers is going to score a share of points, right?
Yes.
So those touchdowns aren't going to disappear. The question is who's going to get them, right?
Right. Is it going to be an Owen Shambar? Is it a Mike Albano? Is it the new quarterback they have? Is he a running guy? What can they do here? That kind of thing. You're right.
You look at Peabody, they scored 311 points last year. Dom Scalise, Eli Batista, and Alex Silva, only 3 guys. They accounted for 230 of those points. Now, that's a lot of points for 3 guys, out four. Now, Peabody may not score 300 points, but they're going to score 200, 250. Somebody's going to get those points. Who's it going to be? Marblehead, same thing. 27 seniors on the team. And I go down their stats from last year, and I feel like there's just not a lot of known commodities.
Yeah.
Right? Usually you look at Marblehead, if they have 24 guys coming back, there's somebody on the list that's got, 500 yards last year, 30 catches last year, what have you, something to stay. But they've just been so spread out that the question is who's going to be that bell cow? You just don't know. And so I feel like that's the exciting thing for me. I feel like, these teams, it's not that they're not going to be good or that, the numbers are going to be down. It's that we just don't know which kids are going to be the ones carrying them, are going to be the ones putting up those big numbers, and sort of that unpredictability, I think makes it somewhat exciting.
Have you found that too when we've done our, we make our annual crystal ball predictions, you and I, over 2 days, Stan. We had the first one in today, Thursday, and the next one's coming out tomorrow. I found that in years past, there were more, if I can use the word certainties, maybe in that, like, that so-and-so is going to, he ran for 780 yards last year. He's back, most of the line's intact. He's going to have another great year. Far more picks this year, at least I felt like, were, if things go well, yeah, this could happen, but there aren't as many guarantees, I guess. So it's really having to dig deep and look and see, as you said, go back to that word personnel, what the personnel is around certain players, and maybe try to make your predictions that way.
I would say, what's that?
No, go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just saying, I just put together my my football picks for the week. We're running those, in tomorrow's papers. Week one's always tough, right?
Yeah,
you don't know what to expect. I think a couple weeks in, you kind of get a feel for these teams and makes the predictions maybe a little bit easier each week when we go game by game here across the North Shore and the Cape Ann. But this week was tough. I mean, I don't know, some of these games, I'm looking down the line. Manchester's going to West Bridgewater, who had a great season last year, but don't know much about their team this year. At St. John's Prep playing Marshfield. You like to think St. John's Prep is going to win that one. Salem,
but that's no
Danvers.
Guarantee. I mean, Marshfield is a top 10 team, maybe top 8 team in the state. And they've given the Prep great games. I mean, what was it? Was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago? The Prep was down with like under a minute to go and had to rally to win it down there.
Yeah, true. So, I mean, and it doesn't get any easier as you go down the line. We just talked about Danvers, how they got a lot of new faces. They're going against a Salem team who had that incredible run last year, but they lost a lot of seniors.
Yeah.
No, they got some of their skill guys back, but I don't know if you want to touch on Salem. That's a team that
well, I was gonna say, you know what? Well, that's a good point. Why don't we just kind of let's take an overview of the Northeastern Conference first, because that's where most of our teams lay. Between the two papers here, we cover 8 of the 10 teams. I think everybody but Saugus and Winthrop. So it's an easy way to kind of go over that. Willie, you talked to Coach Bouchard. I saw Salem in the 7-on-7s this summer. What is your take on this team? As Nick just noted, coming off of a year in which they went to the Division VI Super Bowl, first time in 24 years, incredible buzz around the team, the city. Now a lot of those guys are gone. They do have Rocco Ryan back. He's the name on the team. But what else do you see coming from this team in 2024?
Well, I just think, the vibe is good. I mean, they know what it takes to win, right? They've seen good. And it's a lot easier. It's just like momentum in your science class, right? It's a lot easier to keep the train on the tracks when the train's already on the tracks. And so that's the responsibility for this group. It's a lot easier to be good when you've seen good and you believe that you're going to be good. The vibes in camp were very strong, not like they were 3 or 4 years ago. And that really is the biggest, hardest thing sometimes, is to learn how to win. And they know how to win. Now, it's not going to be easy, but they know how to win, and they've seen what's good. They've seen what it takes, and having had that demonstrated for them, they know how to emulate it now. I mean,
the culture is there. I mean, it's been set.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's not a massive roster, right? They don't have, 100 kids to choose from. The numbers are up. I think it's around 60, 65, which is more than it was last year, more than it was 3 or 4 years ago. But it's not as deep as some of the bigger teams around here. And the schedule is not, it's not easy, but it's not, super challenging either. I mean, I think, obviously, if you had to pick more wins than last year or fewer, they won 10 games. I mean, it's going to be really difficult to win 10 games again.
It will.
Right. But, if they win 7, by no means is that a failure of a season.
No.
And I think that's exactly what you're looking at. A very, very fascinating game opening day with Danvers, a Danvers team that was 1 win away from the Super Bowl last year as well, and similarly has been decimated by graduation. So, I feel like that's a huge game. Like whoever wins that game is going to be feeling their momentum and ready to carry it the rest of the way. And whoever doesn't win that game is really going to have a good week 2 of practice to make sure their season doesn't go into a tailspin.
And Salem goes on the road for a 4-hour bus trip the following week to play up at Brewer, Maine, who are also the Witches. So, that's awful tough to go up there 0-1 and feel like, okay, we got to win this week. I mean,
it could be, but that could be, honestly, if they don't win, that could be the best thing to happen to them, is get out of town, go bond, go be together, like the Bruins going to Lake Placid in 2011. I mean, if they don't beat Danvers, that could be the best thing to happen to this team. Just getting that chance to bond together and sort of have that experience. I mean, that's really, really cool, if you ask me.
Well, I think, if I'm one of the Salem coaches, I am getting the message across to the players, as any coach wants to do. Last year was last year. We're not worrying about that. It's a new season. We can't rest on our laurels. But it's also, I feel like, a prove it season for Salem. And again, if I'm a coach, I'm saying, okay, prove that you can do it again. And maybe that isn't necessarily end up in the Super Bowl, as you said, Willie, but prove that we are not, we had this generational class and we had this fantastic run. And now we're just going to slip back to 500. No, prove that you can be a 7-win team. Prove that you can win big games. Prove that you can get back to the playoffs. And that's going to be a yearly thing from now on, not just an aberration when we have a tremendous class of athletes. So that would be the motivating thing for me that I would want to pass along to my players. Like, hey, we achieved we didn't get that Super Bowl win, but we did everything else we wanted to do. Now the key is we have to stay at a high level. We expect excellence from ourselves and our program. This is what it takes to do that. This is the requirement and the dedication it takes. Can they continue to do that? And we shall see this year. Okay. Willie, we touched upon Peabody a little bit earlier. Let's talk about the Tanners. Fantastic 3-year run they've been on. They've had what? 4 losses the last 3 years, if I'm remembering that right. 10-1, 10-1, and 9-2.
7-4, but
7-4. Okay, so 6
we
losses.
talk about a team that feels like it has something to prove. I mean, 10-1, 10-1. What do they have to show for it? A lot of people would tell you nothing. I know there's a lot of people around the NEC large that think, wow, you did that in the small. Even though they beat Marblehead, they beat Beverly. They didn't play Masco, didn't play Danvers. So, now they're up in the Dun and they want to win that one too. And so that gives them, it's tough to find motivation when you're, coming off 10-1, 10-1, and you've won something like, I think it's like 27 consecutive regular season games or something like that.
Yeah,
But,
it is.
You haven't been to a Super Bowl, and the NEC Dun teams say, yes, so what? You won the baby division. So that gives them something to prove. I think their defense is going to be excellent. I think they're going to have to prove they can score points. They struggled to score points at times last year with Batista in the lineup. And as I said, you got 230 of your 300 odd points out the door. They won a lot of games on kicking last year, field position and field goals from Scalise. That's out the door. A kicker like that doesn't walk into a high school team really barely ever. So they got the culture. They got a great line. I think they're going to run the ball a lot more, but I do think they can play like a team that has something to prove. And again, similarly to Salem, I mean, are they really going to win 10 games 3 years in a row? Probably not. That's never happened in school history. So I would say that seems unlikely. But if you win 8 and you win 2 playoff games finally, who cares about the regular season? I mean, that's really the goal, is to try to get into that third round of the playoffs where they've been stymied and unable to get to that final 4. So that's really the goal for them in my view. And we'll see what happens, come November, when they get there. I mean, they're a few steps ahead of Salem development wise. I think, they expect to be in the playoffs, and now they want to win playoff games. Whereas, they've kind of, now that you've qualified 3 years in a row, you kind of feel like, okay, now it's time to take the next step. And the qualifying part is sort of expected, not that it's automatic, they got to earn it, but it's sort of a baseline expectation. They're not going to be just happy to be there.
In fairness to what you mentioned earlier, the 10-win seasons, it's important to note that for many, many years, teams played really 9 or even 10-game seasons. So to go 10-0 3 straight years, you'd almost have to go undefeated 3 years in a row. So it's I understand why they for a program as storied as Peabody, why they've never done that. It's not like that should be surprising given the fact that 11 games.
Yeah, I would say
more recent past.
I mean, I don't know how many of our teams out of our 15, I don't know how many have had 3 straight 10-win seasons. I mean, maybe
Gloucester.
Maybe
Gloucester, I think, had 4.
Gloucester,
from 07 to 10, I think.
Yeah, Gloucester, maybe St. John's, and that's about it. Like, I mean, 10 wins is a lot. 10 wins is a lot, and that's why I feel like these guys deserve to have a chip on their shoulder, because I feel like they're 2-10. You're 20-2 the last 2 years, and people are still kind of looking at you like, are you that good? So, I mean,
I don't know if I agree with the whole.
I feel like that's a good thing.
What did you say, like the baby division? I don't know if people look at it like that. I mean,
I've heard a lot of that. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. I don't hear that. I mean, the last few years, I think certainly Peabody, Salem the last 2 seasons, Winthrop's always up for an upset. I mean, it's not like those teams can't play with their upper division foes, but
oh no, I mean, especially the team a couple of years ago. I mean, if they would have laid waste to those teams up there last year, I don't know, but people motivate themselves in certain ways. That's kind of like college football point of view there, maybe.
Mhm. All right, let's switch over to Danvers. We touched on them a little bit. Tons of new faces this year in the lineup. But Willie and Nick, you know this too. We both know that Ryan Nolan is one of the great young minds out there. He always seems to be able to get the best out of the personnel that he has. He gets them to buy in and commit to the weight room and for the betterment of the team. I think this year is going to be a test, though, because they're so young, they're so green. What I will say, I think, is a real bright spot for Danvers is getting Aiden Perry back on the line. He's going to be the only senior up there. He missed all of last year. I think he was injured on the first day of tryouts last year.
He's a big boy, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, he is. He had a great year as a sophomore. Missed all of last year, but he's back this year. He's going to have a lot of newbies around him. But I think that's a great building block for them because, with Danvers under Ryan, it's for all the skill players that they've had, whether it's Matt McCarthy or Matt Andreas or, Owen Gasanowski, whatever. I feel like it's always started in the trenches. That's where the any success that they've had has laid the trenches and on their defensive play. So, can this group coagulate and do that? Maybe not to the success that last year's team had, reaching the Division 5 state semifinals, but can they put the pieces together, Willie, and make a run into the playoffs?
I like that word coagulate, and I would say for them too, it's not over in September. I mean, they started 0-2 last year and won 8 of their next 10. So, even if things don't go great against Salem or Tewksbury, there's time for them to right the ship. That's totally fine. So that's kind of how I look at that. I mean, they're a team that always improves as the year goes on, and that they're going to be a tough out. In any game they play.
Well, I know you had mentioned Owen Shanbar as a guy you think is going to get a lot of run for these guys. I know the coaches really like him as somebody who I think the phrase that Ryan Nolan used was he has all the measurables that Gasanowski had a year ago. You're going to see like Marco Betancourt. He's another guy who played a nice role last year for them as a fullback. I think you'll see him get the ball a little bit more. George DeBoule could really help them out. Albano, who we mentioned, Mike Albano, he's a wideout. He's got 2 sophomores on the outside with him, Evan Teixeira, Jack Houston. And we mentioned the quarterback, he's a newcomer, Nate Wise. I think, just from watching him in practice, he has a big arm. I don't know that we'll get to see that right away just because of the offensive structure that they want to use. But it's nice knowing that they have that ability to do so. So while they'll be going with a double wing, if they need to throw the ball, if it's close late, they're down by a score, they have the ability to do that. And it seems like they have some wideouts who can make plays on the outside. Nick, let's move over to Gloucester. You have become immersed in all things fishermen. And they too graduated a ton of talent last year. John Gucciotti's gone, the 2 Toppin brothers, most of their offensive firepower is gone. How are they going to be this season?
Well, it's tough to say. Like you said, they definitely lost some talent. They got off to that great start last year, 3-0, and then we're over 500, got into the playoffs, but then kind of sputtered towards the end of the season, losing their final 3 games to finish under 500. So definitely some strides, though, in Gloucester, I think, with the program, looking at last year compared to recent years before that. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, they're one of those teams that's going to implement the wing T familiar system in Gloucester. Obviously had a lot of strong seasons, very strong seasons in the early 2000, late 2007, 2010. That stretch there, and even before that, running the wing T. So he thinks, head coach Dan O'Connor thinks they got the personnel that's going to cater well to that style. And a lot of those guys grew up playing youth football under the wing T system, so they're familiar with it. There's definitely questions at quarterback, but it seems like Cameron Rodolosi has separated himself a little bit, and he's seems to be running that system pretty well as of now. And then he's excited about their running back core, which obviously they're going to get a ton of carries, splitting it up pretty evenly right now. I'm not sure if there's going to be one or two guys that really separate themselves from the pack there, but he gave me 6 names that they're all going to chip in. Joe Allen, who was a fantastic, coming off a fantastic season on the wrestling mat. Nash Marshall, Nico Alves, we know him from other sports as well. Thomas Cribbs, and Jalen Severino, who's lightning quick. So they definitely have some guys capable of, doing some damage out of the backfield. And like I said, the numbers overall are up over there. They had over 70 kids come out for the program this year, and I think they're still trying to build something. What is this, Dan's 4th, 5th year now as the head coach, and they're going back to the wing T. So they're excited, going to be heading over to Herd Stadium on Saturday to take on Beverly, a team that really struggled last year. And I think Gloucester gave it to them pretty good last year. Was it like 42-20 or something like that?
Yeah. But Gloucester had the lead throughout. I mean, Beverly got within a score, I think, a couple times. And then I want to say Gloucester scored on their first 6 offensive possessions.
Yeah. So we'll see if that's the same tape this year. I don't think so. I think Beverly's a little bit more experienced, and obviously coming off that tough season, they're going to be ready to play a home opener. And they got Danny Pierce back under center. He did some nice things for them last year. Who's the other guy on the stud there? Considine.
Yeah, Jack's Considine. Yeah,
pretty good player. So O'Connor's looking forward to the matchup. I think the boys are excited over there in Gloucester, and they're trying to build something back up. You know how much Gloucester loves their football, and I was
going to say, when we were doing our series of football stories in our August, looking back on the past, and if you haven't had a chance to do that, please do so. We Matt and I and Nick went through a bunch of topics as it pertains to football in the 21st century in the North Shore, and who are the best running backs, who are the best surprise teams, who are the best linebackers, all this different stuff to get people ready for football. But you're reminded of just how great that Gloucester football dynasty was late in the aughts, 2007 to 2010. It was all, wing T stuff. And, granted, they had some tremendous individual talents. They had big guys up front. But Dan O'Connor and the guys on his staff remember those years fondly, and what they wouldn't give to get those days back. Maybe it's like one of those cases where you can't come home again, and in a football terminology sense. But I don't see why going back to the wings T would be a bad thing for them. I think it's a formula that's worked in the past, and if that suits, again, comes back to personnel. If that's what suits their personnel, so be it.
Another good thing too is they don't have. Good thing for the future, I guess I should say, is they don't have a ton of seniors. It's really a junior-led team. So a lot of these guys are going to be back in the fall next year, and look to start building something this year off of a bounce back campaign last season with the 5 wins and making it back into the playoffs. So
yeah, there you go.
Like I said, they're excited, and a lot of these guys are going to be here for they're all 4 captains are juniors. So those guys are going to be leading them for the next 2
I don't know if that's ever happened before. I have 4 junior captains. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, and they do have some seniors that saw time last year and whatnot, but definitely going to be a junior, sophomore-led team.
Well, what do you see from this Beverly team, Phil? I mean, you mentioned them briefly. Nick mentioned them briefly with the the big game with Gloucester. I look at that as one of the most intriguing games of opening weekend, certainly right alongside that Danvers Salem game in a very similar vein. 2 teams with a lot to prove. Beverly wants to prove it's a new year, much better. Gloucester wants to prove last year was no fluke. They're not going back down. And so what does Beverly do to right the ship? I mean, 9 wins in the last 3 years is not what they've come to expect in the Garden City. And so they want to turn that around. you look at some of the athletes they have, and they've got some exciting ones. They've got some exciting running backs returning from injury. The vibe in the Garden City just seems to be so much better than it was last November.
I mean, it seems that way. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going to practice, there's energy, there's enthusiasm. But, this sounds crazy to say, but there's less coaching of emotion, if that makes sense. Like, I felt like the last year or two, sometimes the coaches had to, like, come on, guys, let's go, like on a big hit or a first down, like getting the guys up and things like that. I didn't see that at the practice. Guys were bought in. The captains were taking ownership of the team. The other guys were all into what they were saying. So again, it's just preseason, and that doesn't translate into October, November, but it's a good sign. Hey, we talked about Peabody trying to win 10 games in a row for the third straight year. Beverly football history goes back more than 130 years. They'd never lost 10 games in a season until last year. That should be all the motivation in the world for this year's team to be like, never again, we're turning the page. What do we need to do to make this better? It's been a tough last 2 years. And really, they've, what is it now? 5 straight losing seasons for Beverly, which I don't think has ever happened in program history, ever. And you don't want it to get to a place where that is accepted. That is the worst thing for any athletic program where it's like, oh, well, this, that. I mean, would 4-6 or 4-7 be an improvement? Yeah, but why shoot for that? I mean, play to win. You can go 6-5. That would be fantastic. I mean, 5-6 would be really good too, but shoot for the winning record. I think they have the players here who can do it. Nick, you mentioned Jack Considine, big senior nose tackle, tight end. Real physical specimen, getting a lot of college looks already. Quiet, but gets his talking done on the field. I love the fact that Roman Sullivan's back. He's another guy that missed all of last season, tore his ACL last August. After a really good second half sophomore year running the ball, he was primed to be the lead back a year ago. Now he's back. He's healthy. Nick, you mentioned Danny Pierce. He did it on the basketball court as a sophomore, a good baseball player, Willie. And now he is the full-time quarterback after playing probably half of last season with the since graduated Blake Kessel back there. He knows what it takes to win. And you have a lot of other guys who can step up into roles and are ready to help out. Sean Costa Jr., I think he's healthy now again. He's going to take some of the running responsibility. Liam Timponi on the outside. Ray Quietek outside. Callan McKay can catch passes out of the A slot. Jaden Santos, the wingback. The two White brothers, Greg White and Floyd Wright. A good size line up front too. Ricky Torres can play up there. Lucas Monfett, Colby McLean. Jerome Sutton defensively. Alex Marquez. A lot of guys that can make differences here at Beverly. So I think they're deeper. They've been healthy, knock on wood for them. And this is a good spot for them in the opener. It's a team that, they've had difficulty with the last 2 seasons, but it's certainly beatable in Gloucester. They'll have a lot of new faces. They'll be looking to, work their way, get on track. Beverly has a little more experience than, while I would put Gloucester as a slight favorite, I think it's a game that Beverly should go into feeling like we're winning this game and we're going to equal last year's win total today and start off the season on a big note. All right.
And you had a note too in the preview on Beverly. Obviously the home openers at Hurd, but they might be playing some games under the lights on the turf there.
Yeah, they should be ready. The light poles are up. I think they're working now on just kind of getting everything fine-tuned to, stands and stanchions and things like that. So I would think, maybe by the game they're hosting Peabody, I want to say, they could be ready for Friday night lights there. So that's exciting.
Good idea. If they want coverage, I would say stay on Saturday.
Yeah, selfishly. Unfortunately, the players
You
all
know,
want to play Friday nights. I love Saturday football, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's
the
like,
players all want
I want to win the lottery too, but it's not going to happen. So let's just,
All right,
let's
let's
keep our
move along
traditions
quickly
intact.
here because we're spending a little too much time. We want to try touching everybody. Let's
Okay.
put Marblehead and Swampscott together. Exciting news for them before the season even began. They're going to be playing their annual Thanksgiving Day game on the Wednesday night, the day before at Fenway Park. So that is really cool for them. Willie, what do you see about Swampscott? And then maybe I can touch a little bit on Marblehead where I went and watched them practice.
I just think it's gonna come down to the quarterback. They had themselves a great summer. We'll see what happens. They got a lot of good athletes. Three-headed monster there at receiver with Tripp and Kearney and Marino. And Davis is out there to catch passes too. Two really good running backs, and Butler and Bush. And so, a lot of pieces in place. They figure to be in the playoffs, and we'll see if it all comes together. The line is not huge, but a lot of them have returned from last year. That was sort of the Achilles heel in some of their losses last year, and they're all experienced and whatnot. So, they should be improved. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I would put them probably as a slight favorite in the NEC Lynch, but I honestly think any of the five teams have a chance to win that league, and I'm not sure anybody's gonna run the table in it. So it should be fun to watch.
Do you get a sense of which of the two quarterbacks is going to play? I had a chance to watch Von Bada play over the summer at 7-on-7s, and I thought he threw a great ball.
I mean, I think he has a slight edge, but the other guy played in the New England finals down at Zavarian or wherever it was. So, but I would say Vimbata probably has a slight edge. But I was going to say that when we talked about the quarterbacking earlier, too, the crystal ball stuff. I mean, I think of our 15 teams, at least 10 of them have at least some sort of battle going on at quarterback where you're not 100% sure who's going to play. Now,
Yeah.
some of those are 50-50. That's probably two or three teams. And some of them are 70-30, but that means if a kid maybe has a couple bad series, maybe they try the other one or whatever. So that's one of the interesting things about this year too. I feel like a lot of teams don't have that quarterback locked down for 100%.
No, I mean, you're essentially talking Beverly, Salem, Danvers, Fenwick, and who would be another team there?
I mean, Pingree certainly, Essex Tech certainly.
Yeah.
But I don't even know if some of the Danvers, they got a new guy. So, I mean, unless there's literally no one else, I mean, you never know. That could change a heartbeat. And look what we saw last year with Fenwick, one of the best quarterbacks in the North Shore, Lehman gets hurt and Clifford has a great season. So, things can change on a dime at that position in a lot of these spots too.
Marblehead, of course, the Big Blues, ancient rivals, arch rivals, I should say. First non-winning season in, I think since Moses wore short pants last year. Terribly disappointing 5-5 campaign. But if you look at it with the caveat that, hey, they started 0-4 and they finished 5-5. I mean, okay, it's nothing to throw a party over. But I think there was promise for these guys coming back. And then you get down there and you talk to guys like Crew Monaco, he's captain this year. Crew was on that state championship hockey team that Marblehead iced last year that started 1-6 and went on to do that. Now, you don't have that luxury in football because the season isn't, you don't have as many games or whatnot. But I think there's a real hunger for these guys to prove that, hey, complete aberration last year. We want to be back to the 8, 9, 10 win Marblehead teams that people have gotten used to seeing over the last, say, decade and a half here. I think a question mark that I still don't have answered, and maybe they do in Marblehead by now, but are they going to go with one quarterback, or are they going to keep rotating the two guys? You have Colt Wales, the senior captain, you have Finn Gallup, the junior. You think in a lot of those situations, guys might be like, well, we'll do what's best for the team and whatnot. But I think there's a super competitiveness to both these guys that they want to be the guy, and I don't blame them. Why would you want to share the position if you don't have to? So I think, that will push both of them to help the team be better. Brady Selvays is going to be a senior captain for this team. That's going to be, a key part of it, along with Bodie Smith. He's another guy. Justin Gonzalez up front. Well, you mentioned, Willie, that they are big up front, with some of the guys they have up there. Javeri Montgreo, he's another big guy that they have. Gunther Ferenbach, Declan Gibson, Ian McComish, I want to say, is another one. And then we haven't even gotten to the guys like Sam Thompson and Ryan Golden and Cam Quigley, and those guys will catch the ball on the outside. So I would think, is it going to be, 2021 unbeaten Marblehead? Probably not. But I think this is going to be a much better team than we saw last year. And speaking of a team that should be better, our last NEC team to touch on, Masconomet. Willie, tell us about the Pat Sheehan era that is beginning up in Boxford, and what you've gleaned about this group, how they want to bounce back from a 2-8 season last year.
Yeah, similar to everybody else, just building good energy, all that good stuff. Big junior class, some decent seniors. I think they'll be really good at defensive end. They have Cash Karnowski and Will Magnifico there. It's drinking out of a fire hose right now. They're learning new schemes on both sides of the ball. So there's going to be growing pains with that. There's going to be schematical errors, but hopefully they'll make up for that with their athleticism and the ability to shake it off. And hey, we'll see what happens. I mean, that's the bottom line. Tough schedule for them out of the gate, Newburyport, Billerica, but they expect to compete and then, see what happens when they get into their NEC games. I mean, it's a tough conference. If you're going to make the playoffs, you got to play well in those games. Those are the games that are going to make or break your season. And so, like our other clubs, they're going to try to get better as it goes and kind of see what happens. I like Jack Fabiano's ability to play a great number of different positions. He's a guy to watch for them for sure in terms of total offense. I don't know if he'll be at running back all the time or receiver all the time, but he'll be splitting his role and getting plenty of touches, that's for sure.
Let's change gears and touch upon the Cape Ann League quickly, where we have a few teams there as well. Nino, you have Manchester Essex coming back into the fold. I mean, they're a Cape Ann League school program, but they are coming back as a football team into the league this year. Tell us about the Hornets. For them, I'm guessing it probably starts with the quarterback, Zach Hurd, right?
Yeah, Zach Hurd, first, before we even touch on that, they're thrilled to be back in the Cal. I think it's better just travel-wise for them. They can kind of reignite some of these rivalries with the other Cal teams, and they're still going to keep some out-of-conference opponents on the schedule. Obviously, I mentioned they're going to West Bridgewater, 2-hour bus ride out there probably tomorrow night to kick things off. And then they got another road game. It's escaping me at the moment. Let's see, I get the schedule right here. They go on the road again in week 2 to they host Rockland, so another out-of-conference opponent. And then it's all Cal teams for the most part. So they're really excited about that. I think it's a good place for them to be. The CAC was one thing, but they kind of felt like they were the outlier in that division. A lot of those teams had rivalries and were similar schools, and then you get this, I don't want to say random, but a team kind of out in the other side of the neck of the woods competing there. So they're thrilled to be back in the Cape Ann League. And yeah, you touched upon Zach Hurd. He had a pretty strong season a year ago for the Hornets. I think he threw for over 1,300 yards, rushed for almost 600 yards. He's a talented kid. He played on the basketball team this year. He was a defensive specialist for them, and they went to the Elite 8 round on the basketball field. So he's definitely an athlete. I've seen him at both sports now, and he can throw the ball a little bit. But they too are going to be more of a run-heavy team, I think. So it's going to be interesting to see them facing some new teams. And yeah, we'll see what that looks like in the Cape Ann League with them.
All right, Nick, I know you talked to some other Cape Ann League coaches too. Can you touch upon Ipswich and Hamilton-Wenham for us as well?
Yeah, sure. Ipswich, real quick, only 26 kids on that team. So they're low in numbers, but he said it's a group that is willing to fight for each other. They've been really locked in at practice. He's confident, Coach Zach Lampkin is confident with the top 13 or so that he's got. So if they can stay healthy, they're going to compete. They got some athletes on that team, some decent size. But it's definitely going to be an uphill battle just from a personnel standpoint when you only got 26 guys in the program. I mean, they can't really field the JV team, and they don't want to beat some of these guys up because they're going to be, all these starters are going to be playing two ways, which is a theme for a lot of programs, regardless of how many guys are on the team. But
Wait, you said 26?
26 players for Ipswich. Yep.
And they have a team?
What's that?
I feel like that's the kind of numbers where you go form a co-op. 26?
Yeah, 26 guys.
I didn't know that. Oh God, I have to revise some of my crystal ball stuff. Like, they're not going to get through the season. 26.
Yeah, he's definitely worried about injuries. They got some younger guys that he can throw in if need be and when need be. But it's definitely going to be, like I said, kind of a challenge with that low of numbers.
But they've got some tough kids in there too. I mean, like Luke Weil, Will Gromko, those guys are tough guys.
And they got experience. Those guys have all played at the varsity level too. Their other captain, Massey Pinsky, he's a senior. Luke Weil and Will are both juniors. But really, it's 12 or 13 guys that are going to play both ways. And Vin Winter is back at quarterback. He did some nice things last year. I think he might let him pass it a little bit more this season. But it's going to be, if they're able to stay healthy and hold up, that's going to be the biggest challenge for Ipswich for sure.
Whereas Hamilton-Wenham lost 9 games to start last season and won their last 2. In fact, they shut out Ipswich on Thanksgiving, and they bring back a fair amount of talent.
Yeah, and they have better numbers. I think the players there are really starting to grasp the system. There's not so much of a learning curve there with Tim Fryermuth entering his third or fourth season now.
Third season,
third season for him. So they got Caden Schrock back, who was a beast on the basketball court last year. I've heard from Tim that he's really hit the weight room too. He's a big guy. He can kind of carry the load offensively from that running back position. Caden McCollum is going to be their quarterback. He's also a linebacker too. That's pretty strong. So they got some pieces. And like I said, they seem to have more experience and more depth. I think this could be a season that Hamilton turns it around a little bit under Tim Fryermuth, and we know what kind of football background he has. You can't really blame him for the lack of winning seasons these past couple of years. They've dealt with their fair share of injuries too. I think last year, going into the season, they were missing a bunch of guys, and then they had like a flu run through the team at one point that cut them back for a week or two. So hopefully they can stay a little bit healthier this year and start to make some improvements under Fryermuth in year 3. But yeah, they got pretty much everyone back outside of like Chris Collins, who was their starting back last year, and Cooper Suleman was another skill player for them.
Yeah, but he had over 400 yards receiving last year, Cooper.
Yeah, he's a good player. So they get some guys to replace, but who doesn't, right? And they got a lot of guys coming back. So I think definitely could be an improved season for them. And he's added the defensive staff, Juan, our good friend Juan from Essex Tech, football guru himself. So he's added him to the staff. Tim Fryermuth is a teacher, I believe, at Essex Tech. So they know each other from the basketball and from being there. But
that's a perfect segue into Essex Tech, Willie, their second year in the Cape Ann League. We know they've got Jacoby Casanelli Tarasuic. We know they got Jake Gilbert in the backfield. What else do you think the Hawks will show us in 2024?
Yeah, those are the guys I know. I mean, Xavier Parsons pretty quick. I just think they got a lot of guys that played last year, so they should be better, right? They've seen it. They've seen the Cal, and they're ready to go. I mean, they know what it takes now, right? Last year it was all new. Teams they'd never seen before, stadiums they'd never been to before, trying to find a map, figure out where you park, where's the visiting locker room. There's no more of that. So I think it's back to business, and, I think the experience they gained is going to help them, and they'll certainly be in a lot more of these games for sure.
Okay. And so covered pretty much all the teams, right, except for St. John's Prep, who we know is going to be back and hungry again.
Yeah, St. John's, Fenwick, and Pingree we should still touch on, but yeah, St. John's, biggest program in the region, obviously. One of the premier programs in the state, lost in the Division I state Super Bowl last year. It's the fourth Super Bowl they've been to in the last, 5 playoff seasons? No playoffs in 2021, so 18, 19, 22, 21, and 23. Yeah. Fourth time in the last 5 playoff seasons. I would expect it's the same lofty expectations this year over there. I mean, the biggest question mark, obviously, is who's going to play quarterback. And I'm sure the team knows by now, but it's a really interesting case. On the one hand, you have Deacon Robillard. He's a senior captain. He's won 18 of the 20 games he's ever started at St. John's Prep. He's led them to a state championship. He threw for almost 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns last year. You'd think, of course, he's the quarterback. Well, you have this 6, almost 5 freshman who is a national highly ranked recruit. And when I highly ranked, I mean like literally any college in the country would be interested in this kid, named Chris Vargas. He's got a rocket arm. He makes, for a kid who's never taken an actual high school snap, he looks extremely good in drills and practice and all the camps he goes to and whatnot, and the skill set and potential are off the chart. So there was an injury to Deacon earlier in training camp. I haven't been back there in a week, so I don't know if he's back to playing or not. But when they open against Marshfield tomorrow night, I wouldn't be surprised if Vargas was playing, or at least maybe they both saw some time. But that's an interesting question, and I think it's going to tell us, a lot about this team. Maybe not so much like how they approach things. I mean, because I think if I was under center, they're going to do the same thing they always do. They're going to beat you up front. They're going to try to pound the ball, and they're going to throw it when the opportunity is there. And they have some great pass catchers. Merrick Barlow, he's another captain, 6'5", 215, going to Navy. We mentioned Brady Selvase of Marblehead. His brother, who is a freshman, Riley Selvase, he's already 5'11", 180. He's got great ups, terrific hands, runs great routes. He could be a really special player for them. He's going to play right away. Pearson Scala is back as another returning wideout for them. They're going to run the ball between that big offensive line they have. You have Graham Roberts. He's a captain up front. He's 280, 290 or so. You got Alex Mahoris. He's back. He's 285 at right guard. You got Jack DiFilippo, 265 left tackle. Angel Heredia, 260-pound center. Joe Erzik, 230 left guard. Both tight ends, Josh Harmon and Will Kenna back. Kent's about 250. Harmon's about 220. Trying to think. Running the ball. We'll see. Who am I thinking of? I'm drawing a blank here. Came back from last year. Forget me there. Sorry.
They didn't have much back, actually.
Jeff Quigley. Yeah, thank you.
LaGrasse is gone and Aliberti's gone. That's about all they had as far as
so Quigley's back. The fullback, Gail Garcia's back.
That's a big question mark. So we'll
Andrew McMahon is back. And then, you got guys that are going to be defense only. Jackson Tucker's another captain. He's playing linebacker. Nick Shibley, Drew Bossy, who had a good season for the lacrosse team. He'll be back there. Owen White, Evan Castro in the secondary. Davidian Sullivan is back there. Lucas Pelletier, Aaron Radke. Depth is not a problem at St. John's Prep. Talent is not a problem at St. John's Prep. Putting it all together, coming up with the right formula, and finding that certainty at quarterback. My thought would be that if Vargas ends up winning that job, they'll find a role for Robillard because he is a very gifted player in his own right. But we shall see how it plays out. Should be interesting. Willie, Pingree, new coach again. Not new coach again at Pingree, but another one of our new coaches. And that's Pat Downey, who has some experience, who worked a little bit with them last year under Mike Flynn. But they have a lot of new faces this year. Take us through what's going to happen over at the farm this fall.
Well, we can get to them at a later date. I mean, they don't play for 15 days. So new quarterback, Jack Spear from Swampscott, very exciting. A lot of great energy. Swiss Army knife and Cole Piasinski. Big offensive line. They got a couple of twins on the line. Some really exciting guys, but still a work in progress for them. They got a couple of big scrimmages coming up, but their first game isn't until September 21st. So we'll check in with them at that time, and I'm sure we'll be able to get the full rundown. People will be excited to hear that.
All right, I think that leaves us with Bishop Fenwick. Anybody any thoughts, or I can check in there? What do you guys think? I mean, first and foremost, they're eligible for the playoffs again, which they won a year ago. Secondly, Dave Woods is going to win his 200th game this year. He's 2 wins short. There's only 2 coaches that have ever done that, all with North Shore teams. I mean, Jimmy O'Leary did it at St. John's, and the great Jack Welch did it at Ipswich. But real testament to what Dave's been able to do over at Fenwick to win 200 games there, as well as 3 Super Bowl titles, I want to say.
And they got a great test week 1 against Marblehead, right? That should be a really good matchup to kick things off.
We talked a little bit about Braden Clifford. He's back on the Senate. He's a captain. Dylan Patarelli, who saw some time last year as a sophomore, but he's a junior captain. He's going to be the lead back for this team. Aiden Byrne, he's another captain who's a 2-way lineman. I think he's been a 3-year starter, if I remember that correctly. I know he started center for 3 years. So they should have a decent sized line too. Ty Piriano, Tyler Santos, Reed Smith, Odin Garin, all those guys back there. I think Jesse Timpson's going to have a nice year for them as a wideout junior. He's got a lot of skill.
We know their program that we know their team. No, I was just going to say we know they're a team under Woods that does like to throw the ball. So
yeah.
It seems like
Tyler Connolly, the latest in the line of Connolly brothers, he's going to be heavily involved in that mix. So I think Fenwick is going to be just fine, and they will not only have visions of winning a Catholic Central League title, but also making a nice run in the Division 5 playoffs there. So, guys, before we sign off, any last thoughts, predictions, just the commentary in general on the eve here of the 2024 season?
Well, I think the weather's looking great for opening weekend, so that's always a plus, especially for me, who doesn't like the cold games so much. But I am looking forward to having that warm Gloucester High press box in the winter months over in Gloucester. But I think it should be great weekend for weather. We got a lot of good matchups to kick off the season here, and looking forward to diving right in.
Willie?
Looks like he's frozen.
I think he's frozen. All right. Well, I will echo what you're saying. I'm looking forward to the season. This will be my 35th year covering games here at the newspaper, which seems like crazy to hear me say it. But a new year brings hope, and there's the unexpected. You don't know what's going to happen or transpire, and that's exciting too. And you get to follow along with these teams, and just come up with new stories and different guys who come out of the woodwork, haven't made names for themselves, or other guys that as they get older, they get better and better. So that's always exciting to me. Willie, if you're back with us, final thoughts?
Well, we said at the beginning we didn't know who the big names were going to be, and Jesus, we gave people quite a few names to choose from on this podcast. So hopefully somebody's happy about it, and I bet there's at least one kid that scores 1 point. Well, I shouldn't say one point. I'll say 1 touchdown that we didn't mention, because I don't think we mentioned all the kickers. So I'm sure there'll be someone that scores a point, but I bet at least one kid scores 1 touchdown that we didn't even think of, and so that's what makes it fun.
And one thing's for certain, I would say, it's a virtual guarantee that all of our teams will be better comparative to the level that they play at than the Patriots will be this year. So let's leave it at that. Thanks for listening. If you've stayed throughout the whole thing, we really appreciate it. We'll be podcasting throughout the year, not just on football, but on all sports. This was a football-only podcast, but we will be checking in with all of our fall sports soon. So for Matt Williams and Nick Giannino, I'm Phil Stacey. Enjoy the football season, folks.